Welcome to this edition of the Capitol Brief. I'm Seth Berenzweig here in our studios at Berenzweig Leonard in beautiful Tyson's Corner, Virginia, here with my friend and colleague John Tamney. John, how are you today?
I'm great. It's good to be back.
Great to see you. John from editor Real Clear Markets. And before we get started, John, I wanted to put you on the spot, and I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I just want to let you know that I'm very excited about the new book that is now coming out, John's new book, which is going to be really one of the hottest topics, and I predict will be flying off the shelves, When Politicians Panic. Can you just give us a quick snapshot of the book and tell us about the tour that you're teeing up this week?
Well, flash that up a little bit longer. No. No, the book is an economics book. It's that's what it is. Lots of medical books will be written about why the virus was dangerous, why it wasn't. My book makes an economic case that whatever your view of the virus, but particularly if you think it was very threatening and lethal, the last thing you'd ever do is impose economic desperation.
Right.
It makes a case chapter by chapter that the greatest enemy of ill health and disease and death has always been economic growth. And so why on earth, when a virus, per the politicians, was spreading like wildfire, was their solution forcing people out of their jobs, destroying businesses, and taking away the resources that economic growth creates to basically come up with solutions much more quickly? Well,
I would encourage everybody to jump in and get this. And John, I know that you're on a tight schedule this week because you're going to be hopping a flight tonight and going out to the Midwest, and you're going to be hanging out with the good folks out there and talking about the book. So great luck with that, and I can't wait to sit down this weekend and read it.
Good.
So
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, let's talk about a Supreme Court case that is on the docket, and it really combines two of my favorite topics, which is business and sports. It is the case of NCAA versus Alston. Mr. Alston, former West Virginia running back, who was successful at both the trial court and appellate court level in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit out West, fighting against, some would argue, old, archaic NCAA regulations which limit certain aspects of compensation to student athletes. It is, as some would say, amateurism on trial. I would say that it is the future of the intersection of business and sports and politics banging on the door. Tell us a little bit about the background and the big picture here so that the folks can cue in.
Well, I'll begin with a name that you've likely never heard of, Lance Pavlis. Lance Pavlis was a huge recruit from Tomball, Texas in the 1980s. Nationwide, people lusting for him, and he chose Texas A&M. And we never heard of him because he never lived up to the potential that he brought to the campus, to College Station. Mm-hmm. Fast forward 20, 25 years, Johnny Manziel arrives at Texas A&M and not only succeeds, but transforms the school. Suddenly, donations flow in when he wins the Heisman that lead to Johnny Football.
Yep.
And the school, the stadium expanded. It became a showpiece of all showpieces for college football.
Huge cash flow.
And so it's a reminder of something very basic. We talk about athletes being exploited, but the vast majority of them actually never make it, never live up to their scholarship.
Right.
And so the Johnny Manziels are the rare 1%, much less than 1%, who succeed and make lots of money for the schools. Vast majority of these guys never live up to that and actually lose the school money. And I think that's an important way to think about what we're talking about with athletes and in compensation.
Sure, and even fewer of them make it to professional sports, which is an argument that we'll get to in a moment for why it is incredibly draconian and unfair to tell these hardworking student athletes that if they get paid anything beyond a very incredibly strict, narrow band, that they're going to be disqualified and punished, and really have their immediate financial security and their future impacted. But the thing that's one of the aspects that's so fascinating about this case, it's the argument of amateurism. And if I could just set the table on that a little bit, This case is a first of its kind that is now being heard by the United States Supreme Court. It's been about 3 decades since the Supreme Court has heard a case on this issue. And you can imagine over those 30 years how the world has changed, not only in terms of business, but in terms of technology. For example, social media. And you had raised a couple of names, and I would like to raise the name of a gentleman by the name of Hunter Woodhall. He's a beloved track and field star at the University of Arkansas. He's the first student who was the first double amputee to get an athletic scholarship to a major university. He's an incredible story. He's an incredible guy, and he has become a media and internet sensation. And he is when he was 11 months old, he had the lower portions of both legs because of a birth defect removed, and he runs on prosthetics, and he is amazing. People love him. He's a social media sensation. He's gotten all kinds of records. The problem is that he has been offered sponsorship dollars from major corporations while being a student athlete. Under the rules of the NCAA, he's not allowed to profit on what are sometimes called NIL rights, name, image, and likeness rights. And to make a long story short, after making a very difficult decision, he announced on social media that he was no longer able to participate in Arkansas track and field because he was going to be prohibited from being able to get paid from social media. And a couple of days after making that announcement, he posed on Twitter in front of a house that he bought. And because he was able to make money and engage in commerce, and the post was sponsored by Discovery Plus. So, the NCAA is operating under the theory of amateurism. And although it's archaic, and I think it's going to lose, the theory has some old school merit, which basically says, look, these are student athletes, but they're students first and foremost. And you need to be able to ensure that they are able to focus on a structured and non-diluted college education with a university environment that's not distracted by piles of cash, because very, very few of them are going to be out in the world making millions of dollars as athletes. All they're going to have at the end of the day is their education. And if you destroy that, and if you destroy intercollegiate competition by having an imbalance of cash dispersion, then everything's going to get destroyed. But of course, as we know, that's an argument that's really archaic, because now we're living in a new world, and it's certainly different than the world was 30 years ago. So with the case that is in front of the United States Supreme Court, tell us what you think about the case and where you think the Supreme Court's going to go.
Well, I worry the Supreme Court's going to go in some direction that forces pay that wouldn't necessarily otherwise take place. And my reaction is it's overkill. It's overkill because the reality is they're already being paid. Imagine what you get for playing at the University of Alabama, even if you never see the field. You get an education that would cost other kids hundreds of thousands of dollars. But in addition to that, you get to go around for the rest of your life saying that you played for Nick Saban. During the time you were there, you are regularly interfacing with the richest, most prominent alumni at the school. The idea that you deserve pay beyond that, when we know that the vast majority of these athletes won't live up to the scholarships, and that's true at Alabama, that's true at A&M, it's true at USC, why is it that we're making such a big deal about the very few who produce all the wealth for so many? I mean, based on that, we would be saying that the star athletes at these schools are being exploited, because let's remember, professors get paid a lot more because of what happens on the football field. Students get a better education because of what's happening on the football field. All sorts of athletes get a scholarship and get to go to an Alabama because of the success of the few. If we're going to base this on anything, let's say that the microscopic few are the ones being exploited.
So you're saying that it's a little bit of a tempest in a teapot. In other words, yes, you can point to some situations where they create some unfair issues, but if you really kind of zoom out and you take a look at the 10,000-foot view, it's the most fair, balanced, equitable means to ensure that you have a university setting where everybody benefits, even though it may not be perfect for everyone.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind that they leave out so much in these discussions. Is anyone aware that at Clemson right now, the athletic director, Dan Radakovich, they have a system that's true for most of these schools now, that if you go pro and it doesn't work out, but you left Clemson in good standing, you can come back and finish your degree on Clemson. So that's left out. Let's also add in that if you're a college football scholarship player, your scholarship probably costs the Clemsons of the world well over $1 million. When you don't make it, when you don't live up to your potential, can we say that those athletes should pay back the school that wasn't paying them theoretically while they're there? All this is left out. And then I would just add one other thing that's probably a more expansive topic. I think the mistake with all of this is that we're not honest and state the obvious. Why can't players major in college football? You know, they say, well, because you won't make the NFL, that the percentages are very low. Okay, that's fine. But we don't criticize business majors for focusing on business, even though an even smaller percentage of them will ever get a job at Goldman Sachs.
Right.
We don't criticize journalism majors for focusing on that, even though an even smaller percentage will ever get a job at the New York Times.
Right.
But when someone has the temerity to pursue what they are brilliant at, so brilliant at that people offer them something very expensive to come to their school to play, we say, oh no, focus on these other things.
Right.
Focus on subjects not germane to your genius,
right,
as a way of preparing for the future. I find that so insulting to the athlete, much more insulting than the lack of pay.
Well, I agree that they are treated in a way that doesn't make any kind of level sense. And one of the issues in the Alston case is why other kinds of specialized students, like those that are focusing on music, are able to get certain benefits such as additional equipment, musical instruments, and the like. But those are benefits that are not provided to student athletes. There are a lot of ironies that are related to this Alston case that's being heard by the Supreme Court. And one of the most incredible ironies, I think, is that here's the NCAA walking into the Supreme Court, and they're complaining about the impact of a multi-billion-dollar environment that they themselves are responsible for having been created. They have created and contributed to this environment with these multi-billion-dollar licensing deals, television deals, this whole environment. And on the one hand, they're responsible for the architecture of all that scaffolding, but on the other hand, they're saying we need to protect these kids because it's going to hurt them, even though they sit back and they make money from the environment that they've created. There are a lot of interesting student-athlete stories. I'll just mention Paige Buchers, who is a basketball star at the University of Connecticut. She has hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. It is estimated, I've seen an analysis that estimates that she could easily make about $400,000 a year with sponsored tweets and social media posts on Instagram, but she's not allowed to do that, because if she did that, or even if an athlete's parent got any kind of benefit, then they would be automatically disqualified, and then their life could be ruined. The problem with the NCAA model is that it's based upon an outdated concept of amateurism that is not contemporary, is not a contemporary application to the world that we're living in now. And there's a lot of developments that are happening on the political and legal landscape that are within the background of the Supreme Court case that are critical to note. There are several states that have moved forward with legislation on name, image, and likeness revenues to protect student athletes. Florida and California are in the lead of that. The United States Supreme Court, the United States Senate, beg your pardon, is going through a discussion of a bill of student athletes' rights being led by Cory Booker, who interestingly is a former college athlete, where we have kind of almost a ground groundswell of a banging of the door where there's going to be an opening of new economic freedom along the lines of sports betting. It wasn't that long ago that sports betting was illegal. Who came in to change that? The Supreme Court. Now we have this multi-billion-dollar industry. Who might be able to change that within the next couple of months? The Supreme Court. So do you see this changing over time? Because I think this is something that could really dramatically liberalize and change the gaming and sports industry for a long time to come.
I can see it changing. My guess it's going to be mostly unfortunate. I think people are overreacting to something about these rare instances. Look, we do a show from the Washington, D.C. area. What do we know that's true about politics? Precisely because it's a $5 trillion annual budget for the federal government, there will always be money around politics because of that. You can't allocate that much. Same with athletes. Where there's great talent, there will always be money. So we say, oh, well, it's not fair that Reggie Bush made all this money for USC and yet he's not being paid. Oh, please, come on. At the top schools, they are getting paid. We don't see it, but they're getting paid not just in scholarships and getting to know the top. You mean
under the table?
Oh, without question.
Well, wherever
there's talent, there's money.
Right.
It's going to happen. So I think it is a big overreaction. I think there is the point that the most valid argument I've heard about this is Mark Zuckerberg was able to raise funds to start Facebook while at Harvard. But if Reggie Bush has the temerity to profit from his genius while at USC, they take it from him. But I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling too bad for these guys because they are getting what most of us could only dream of. They get a free education, they're cheered for on Saturdays, and they get close personal relationships with the richest alums at the school. So no matter what happens, they've got doors open to them that I can only dream of.
Well, very interesting argument. I would take a little bit of a different approach on this. I believe that this is one of the rare win-win, feel-good stories, I believe, that is happening right now. And I think that the government can actually come in and do good by pushing back on some of this archaic, outdated NCAA regulation. You know, there's the old joke from Ronald Reagan. The time to be concerned is when someone walks up to you and says, hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. You and I always have a healthy dose of skepticism in terms of when the government puts its hands on something, it usually breaks it. The government here is on both the state and federal level is looking at whether they should modernize this environment, this whole powerful multi-billion-dollar financial ecosystem. I think there's a middle ground. I think that there are things that could and should be done for student athletes to at least look at it as a matter of moderation or degree. So, for example, why does it have to be an all or nothing? Why not create some kind of a reasonable balance and scale where the Hunter Woodhalls or the Paige Buchers of the world can make some monetization, some freedom of trade off of their image, off of their success. It should be noted that one of the major legal issues in this case is an issue alleged of antitrust, restraint of trade, because you're obviously telling people that they can't do this. Why shouldn't these student athletes be able to get some kind of compensation other than just being artificially held back on this old, outdated, bucolic, fantasy land model that says that somehow we need to protect these student athletes when the coaches that are helping them are making multi-million-dollar contracts? Why not let these talented student athletes make some money off of the ecosystem of sponsorships with Instagram, with Twitter, to let them have some freedom of movement, some freedom of markets, so that they can get at least some kind of a compromise middle ground. Some of the aspects of Cory Booker's bill, to me, it goes maybe a little bit too far. They talk about, he's even been talking about a potential 50-50 revenue share with student athletes. That's too far. That's a bridge too far. But to just say that these folks get zero when they bring so much value to their conferences, when they bring so much value to their schools, I think there needs to be some kind of a balance. And these student athletes really, at times, put their health at issue. Tua, the quarterback for the Dolphins, almost had his entire professional career blown out because he had his hip destroyed during one of the games. It was a rare miracle story that he was able to come back and preserve his career. But he was making a ton of money for his college when he was playing. So to create this artificial distinction is interesting. One of the things that I find fascinating about your perspective is that you're surprising me a little bit. You're very much of a free marketeer. You're very much of liberalize and open the markets. And for someone to come in and to create artificial constraints and restrictions on that, I would have predicted that that you would have had a little bit of a different perspective on this. What would you say to the countervailing point that kind of an approach is something that is really kind of inimical to the concept of free markets and free trade from an antitrust position? What's your response on that?
Well, there's already a free market with the NBA right now. If you come out of high school, you can go to the G League or you can go play for Mike Krzyzewski. What are you going to do? Because what do you get from that? If you go to the G League and it doesn't work out, that's it. You go and play for Mike Krzyzewski, you get the best coaching at the level you could possibly get. There's a reason that college coaches get paid so well, because their athletes ultimately get paid much, much better once they make it to the next level.
Right.
And so you have a choice. There's already a market choice there to go that route or play for some of the best minds. And you also, let's not forget, get to carry around Duke for the rest of your life in a way that most can only dream of. And so I think we have to throw that in. And again, I think we're talking about the rare instances, the breakout athletes who just transform things. Mm-hmm. If we're going to make that argument, why can't I make the free market argument that, you showed up and took $1 million plus in value scholarship and you amounted to nothing. You were a total flame out. I want my money back. Because once you go down that route of saying, okay, the rarity should get compensated, for one, what's to say that the top athletes, the Johnny Manziels and Reggie Bushes, are going to say, well, why are these other guys, why are the bench warmers getting money on my back? So there's that. Why can't they say that about the college professors?
Right.
But also, why can't the colleges say, oh, well, guess what? Whitney Lewis, who was recruited more heavily than Reggie Bush, but ended up at Northern Iowa, can't we claw back the money that we spent on him?
Well, interesting point. I mean, a scholarship is a scholarship. So if you try to throw strings attached to it, then obviously you're going to be, changing the rules of the game. But
same way, can we agree that we're attaching strings to what happens if an athlete breaks out?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you raised that's an interesting point that I hadn't thought about before is that it is kind of a sport-dependent discussion, because let's say, for example, that you are tremendously talented at baseball in college. You have a minor league that you can go to, so you can focus on your studies. It's not going to be supposedly distracted or diluted by people throwing tons of money at you, which again I think is just kind of a silly, antiquated concept. But at least when you are a baseball player as a professional, you have an intermediate league to go to, which can continue to hone your craft. You don't have that in college football. The NFL owners, who are making ridiculous amounts of money, they don't care enough to be able to put any kind of money into any kind of a B league, for lack of a better phrase. So when these star athletes go and they put their bodies on the line to play college football, it's much more of an all or nothing game, because there is no B league. And a lot of them who are going to be stars in college, they may blow out a knee, they may get injured. The other issue that I have is that, how are we protecting Hunter Woodhall, the beloved track and field star that we're talking about from the University of Arkansas? How are we making his life better by saying, Hunter, you're somehow going to be infected or worsened by being allowed to monetize your Twitter or your Instagram feed with a little bit of money, because we're going to apply 100-year-old rules to say that you're not going to be able to monetize the fact that people love you and they respect you and you're amazing. We're being paternalistic, and we're saying that the school can make just tons of money off of Hunter, but yet we're not going to let him make $1,000 or $1 million off of that kind of sponsorship. Doesn't that seem a little bit unfair?
No, because I don't think you should change rules and get the government involved based on anecdote. Look, there's always going to be these interesting scenarios here. Can we point out that in most instances, track and field, volleyball, and most of these sports wouldn't exist without football? Mm-hmm. So can we at that point say, oh, talk about exploitation. It's the non-revenue athletes exploiting the football players. If you go back to there's no B League for the NFL, ask yourself the question, how many of these athletes, knowing what we know about how college football players are recruited, knowing what we know that the complexes at college football schools are exponentially better than what they'll experience in the NFL, how many of them would choose the B League rather than go play for Nick Saban and Dabo Sweeney and people like Pete Carroll?
Right.
And so the reason pro football owners don't create the B League is they probably recognize it wouldn't be very desirable or profitable. Mm-hmm. And then let's just throw in the NFL owners make lots of money. Well, did they always? Because let's go back to Jerry Jones. When he purchased the Dallas Cowboys, his investment banker told him he was nuts. Roger Staubach wanted to purchase the Cowboys, but could not even raise the funds to do it, could not get a group of investors get together to do it because interest in it was so low. When Jones purchased the Cowboys, the suites were empty. The Dallas Cowboys were a declining brand. It's hard to imagine, yet rare individuals like him, like Bob Kraft, revived a sport that hadn't been doing nearly as well as people think. And so, yes, the owners make a lot of money, but they've taken on enormous risk to get to that point.
Well, and there is some wealth sharing because obviously professional athletes make a lot of money. The NFL CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, creates some kind of a guaranteed aspect of a quotient revenue share. I'm sure the owners didn't give into that completely of their own free will, but they do. And I know that we need to wrap this up shortly, but I think that one of the things that is a clear indicator that a rule or a regulation fails is that it gradually becomes obsolete. These rules have been around without any major modification for over half a century. The Supreme Court hasn't really reconsidered this issue in about 3 decades. There was no social media when the height and the major impetus of these rules came into effect. And I believe that the NCAA's rules in this context are completely obsolete. And I believe at the end of the day that they're unfair. A lot of the points that you raise are excellent and frankly are some of the arguments that I think haven't even really been very well articulated by people that have analyzed this case in the past. But I think that also one of the major accomplishments of new regulations and new rules is the ability of compromise. And surely there has to be some kind of a middle ground where the Hunter Woodhalls of the world are going to be able to be told, you can't participate in your track and field life at the University of Arkansas because the minute that you get $5 from Discovery Plus, we're going to change your life. Even if your mom gets some kind of a benefit or a cup of coffee, then we're going to pull your college eligibility. And at some point, hopefully the government can come in and create some kind of a reasonable middle ground, because right now we're playing in a ground of all or nothing, and I think that that's something that's very difficult. As we wrap up, just to talk about where we are on the legal news front. The Supreme Court decision in NCAA versus Alston should be out by the late June timeframe. The states of California and Florida are enacting new legislation that's going to be blowing out all of these antiquated rules for name, image, and likeness. The United States Senate is having very significant discussions about this. There's going to be a groundswell of change, I predict, that's going to blast the door wide open. And just like the Supreme Court changed the world of sports betting, they're about to change the world of student-athlete compensation, which is going to open up billions of dollars of different additional streams of revenue, which is going to be able to help improve their financial lives. It's going to help create more business. It's going to help create more jobs. And I just think it's a very exciting opportunity. So, John, thanks again for talking about this really cool topic. And I just want to give one more shout out to the new book, When Politicians Panic.
Look at that.
And let's just get that baby right in there. John's going to be on the road this week and traveling
Amazon.
throughout the United States, talking about the book. You know what I'm going to be doing this weekend, John? I'm going to be reading this little baby.
Hopefully watching college sports.
What's the
Final
best way
Four.
to get the book?
Oh, something on Amazon, I think would be Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookstore near you, things like that.
Yes, sir. Fantastic. All right. John, good luck with the travels this
Thank
week.
you.
And thanks for watching us, and we'll be back next time.